The survey vessel Aurora's Edge drifted silently through the velvet black expanse beyond settled space, its hull a latticework of sensor arrays and heat radiators. Captain Joran Saal watched the viewscreen with a steely calm, the blue-white glow of the distant star Epsilon Helios casting shifting highlights on his lined features. Beside him, Lieutenant Mira Al-Karim hunched over the tactical console, fingertips dancing across holographic glyphs as she calibrated the ship's long-range telescopes. Below them lay Epsilon Prime, a world of ochre plains and rust-colored craters, rich with the minerals that made this system a linchpin of Terran expansion. Lieutenant, Saal's voice rumbled through the chamber, drawing Mira's attention. What are we seeing on the planet's dark side? Mira's iris-enhanced goggles flickered as she manipulated the magnification threads. Interceptor Zero-class hunter ships patrolling the Terminator region. They haven't detected us yet. The Coalition presence is stronger than we anticipated, but still sparse enough for a covert approach. She tapped an icon, and the projection of Epsilon Prime rotated, pinpointing the orbital paths of the biovessels. Their standard patrol radius extends about 200 kilometers from the surface. If we thread the Aurora through the shadow cone, we can avoid their sensors long enough to set up our firing position. Saal allowed himself a rare half-smile. Excellent. Prepare the drift vector. We'll hold just out of sensor range until the railgun is ready. Once we have that shot, the Tsar won't know what hit them. Mira's heart fluttered at the mention of the railgun. For decades, the United Terran Federation's brightest minds had toiled in secret, channeling terawatt-scale fusion surges into electromagnetic coils that could accelerate tungsten projectiles to relativistic speeds. Now, the colossal weapon they called Judicator was mounted along the Aurora's port flank, its twin rail assemblies gleaming with promise. If the test succeeded, the weapon would rewrite the balance of power across the frontier dot in the ships. Belly, Chief Engineer Isabel Chan, oversaw the power coupling. She knelt before the control manifold, her cum badge crackling with the colorful hiss of raw energy. Captain, fusion core output spiking to 75%. Thermal regulators at max iteration. If we push beyond 90%, we risk breaching containment. Understood, Saal replied. Isabel, calibrate for 90%. Give me a sustainable 2-minute charge window. We fire only once clean and precise. No room for a botched. Launch. On it, Isabel answered, fingers flying over the rail's field coils. Sparks of plasma flickered across the conduits as the ship's fusion reactor channeled its might. Charging sequence initiated. Mira returned to her station, cross-checking ballistic algorithms against planetary topography. Captain, atmospheric. Density at firing altitude will impose a drag coefficient of 0.0023. I suggest an initial velocity vector of 0.28 c, with a slight angular offset to compensate for wind shear and rotational dynamics. She tapped her pad twice. Trajectory locked. Saal nodded and tapped his command gauntlet. All hands, brace for railgun calibration, weapons bay doors opening. A low groan reverberated through the hull as the massive hatch slid away, revealing the Judicator in its full 2 parallel rails stretching almost 300 meters, each capable of sustaining a megavolt discharge. Power conduits like braided serpents snaked from the ship's reactor, converging on the railgun's breech. In the ambient light of the weapons bay, the rails shimmered with latent potential. On the bridge, officers restrained eager breaths. The display looped through diagnostics. Power level, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%. The Aurora's Edge felt alive, every sensor primed, every system aligned toward a single, monumental purpose. Outside, the planet hung, silent and unknowable. Captain. Saal rose, voice calm but resolute. Lieutenant Al-Karim, you have targeting. Call it when ready. Myra's eyes gleamed beneath her goggles. She toggled thermal imagery, gravimetric sensors, and surface mapping overlays until a clear firing solution emerged. The crater complex, known as Mordecai's Basin, lay 1,108 kilometers. Beneath them, a geologically diverse expanse of basalt spires and mineral veins. Target locked, Captain. Firing parameters within operational tolerance. Ready on your command. Execute. With that single word, the Aurora's edge became a weapon of mass transformation. The fusion core roared as power surged through the superconducting coils. The rails glowed with an eerie blue radiance as magnetic fields built to unimaginable strengths. For an instant, the ship shuddered under the strain, and then with a sound felt more than heard a projectile. The size of a man was expelled into the void at 30% of light speed. Time seemed to stretch as the slug cut through the exosphere, leaving an incandescent trail in its wake. On the bridge, data cascaded across displays. Muzzle velocity, energy yield, trajectory confirmation. The Railgun's instantaneous acceleration allowed no room for error, yet everything had gone to plan. Muzzle velocity, 0.3002 C. Impact. In T-minus 3.7 seconds, Mira announced, voice steady. Below, on the red planet's surface, automated seismic arrays responded in microseconds. Then came the impact, a titanic bloom of fire and molten rock that vaporized within nanoseconds, generating an energy release equivalent to over 1 megaton of TNT. A towering plume of debris stretched kilometers into the sky, and shockwaves rippled outward, flattening everything within a 100-kilometer radius. The view screen shuddered with a distant tremor. The officers exchanged astonished glances. Mira, feed me the containment readings, Sal ordered. Energy sensors registered the shock front's parameters. Yield at 1.15 megatons. Crater diameter estimated at 24 kilometers. Atmospheric. Ionization plume extending to 50 kilometers altitude. Sal absorbed the figures. Confirmation. Humanity now wields a railgun. The entire frontier will hear about this. Before the crew could even savor the triumph, the tactical display blinked red. A new blip emerged. Tsar interceptors, converging at high speed, targeting the Aurora itself. The coalition fleet had finally detected an anomaly in orbit. The Railguns. Power signature. They were coming to investigate and to neutralize the Terran threat. Red alert. Sal barked. All hands, battle stations, shields to full. Evasive thrusters. Prepare to burn Vector 1249. Mira's fingers flew, compensating for the sudden maneuvers. The Aurora rolled as pulse lasers streaked past, their beams. Scorching sectors of the hull. Isabel's voice crackled through the comm system, heavy with urgency. Captain, shields at 40%. Hull integrity dropping. Sal's gaze narrowed. Return fire with point defense lasers. Maria, target their lead ship. We need to break their formation. Chief Weapons Officer Maria Sorensen activated the laser grid. Twin beams danced across the void, slicing through one interceptor's aft section in a flash of orange plasma. The enemy vessel disintegrated in seconds, but 3 others had closed to firing range and launched disruptor bolts. Alarms shrieked as corridors lost pressure. Automated repair drones flitted through ruptures, struggling to seal breaches in real time. The bridge's holographic status grid flashed red, location after location compromising. Lieutenant Al-Karim, Sal growled. Can you recharge the railgun? Myra's jaw clenched. If I reroute power from non-essential systems, I can get a second shot in provided we hold for another 20 seconds. Do it, he snapped. We fire or we die here. The Aurora lurched as another interceptor's disruptors struck home. Sparks flew across consoles. Still, the engineers maintained the power surge to the rail lines. Another brilliant arc ignited along the rails, and once more the Judicator launched its titanium core across the vacuum. This time, the trajectory intersected the cloaked signature of a Tsar dreadnought, an armored leviathan bristling with exotic armaments. The projectile struck the dreadnought's pontoon module, tearing it open in a cataclysmic detonation. Plasmoid fragments cascaded outward, rending two nearby frigates in the blast that the Tsar vessels recoiled, their formation shattered. On the Aurora's edge, the crew exhaled collective relief, shaken by the violence, but elated by the weapons. Decisive power. Captain Sal straightened, voice low but triumphant. "Broadcast a warning," he ordered. "Let every coalition fleet know. We have railguns, and we will use them." Mira leaned back, heart pounding. She stared at the viewport as the crimson glow of Epsilon Prime flared behind her. They had crossed a threshold, a demonstration not just of firepower, but of humanity's willingness to wield it. The Edge had fired its first volleys, and the ripples would be felt across every star system dot in the silence that followed. The crew gathered around the command dais. No one spoke. Words felt inadequate. Instead, they shared a look of resolve. In the cold black between worlds, they had planted the seed of a new era one that would grow to either bloom in peace or burn in war. And somewhere in that uncharted frontier, the Tsar coalition recalibrated their strategy, understanding at last that this was no mere technological curiosity. It was a statement. Humans have railguns, and until one shot had rewritten the balance of power, no one could imagine just how wide that rewrite would reach. The Aurora's edge trembled as the shockwave from Judicator's first shot reverberated through its superstructure. Red alert klaxons blared, and the bridge's holoscreens danced with real-time telemetry. Energy dispersal, shockwave propagation, atmospheric ionization. Lieutenant Mira al-Karim's gaze was unflinching as she absorbed each data point. Every byte of information was a testament to humanity's new might. Impact confirmed, she reported, voice steady. Crater diameter, 24 kilometers. Estimated energy release, 1.15 megatons. Thermal plume rising to 50 kilometers. Seismic aftershocks detectable at least 3 minutes beyond the epicenter. Captain Joran Sal exhaled slowly. "Impressive," he murmured. "But more importantly, did we blind them?" On the view screen, the crimson surface of Epsilon Prime gave way to the blackness of space, where a half-circle of Tsar interceptors converged. Their bioorganic hulls pulsed with violet energy as they adjusted heading vectors toward the Aurora's edge. Tactical Officer Maria Sorensen tapped rapidly, overlaying threat arcs and threat cones. Tsar response team inbound at 18,000 kilometers per second. Maria announced. Their intercept vector suggests they detected the muzzle flash atmospheric light mirrored in local space. They're converging from multiple approach angles. Shields up to 80% and holding? Sal asked. 65 and dropping, replied Operations Chief Lang. Energy clamps at 55% capacity. We can reroute auxiliary power, but that risks deactivating non-critical life support redundancies. Sal weighed the options. Do it. Reroute everything. I don't want to lose Judicator before we get the chance to strike again. Aye, Captain. Lang's fingers flew across the console. On the main display, power flow lines thickened toward the railgun's capacitors. Myra pivoted her chair. Charging sequence reinitializing. We should have power for a second shot in approximately 20 seconds, assuming no further hull breaches. Sal nodded. All hands brace for counterstrike. He tapped his gauntlet, and the command transcoder spilled over the cum grid. Aurora's edge to all stations, battle stations. Hostiles inbound, no mercy. The Tsar counterstroke outside the armored cockpit dome. The vacuum of space transformed. into a tapestry of lethal light as Tsar interceptors opened fire. Curving beams of plasma seared the void, streaking toward the Aurora's edge like living comets. Defensive countermeasures deployed. Chaff clouds of reflective particulates spun off the hull, and point defense lasers blinked in retaliation, vaporizing incoming bolts before they could strike. A direct hit scoured away several square meters of outer armor. Sirens shrieked as atmosphere vented from a starboard compartment. Automated repair droned sleek, insect like nano-assemblers raced along external conduits, welding and sealing like mechanical termites. Damage report, Sal demanded. Shields at 30%, Lang answered. Hull breaches in sectors C4 and D3. Integrity at 62%. Repair bots en route, but we'll need manual oversight if we sustain another hit of that magnitude. Maria's eyes flicked through threat categories. Their lead ship, the Orithia, is approaching. Tactical signature indicates hostile intent. It's their dreadnought flagship. If it locks a rail-mounted particle cannon on us, we're dead. A tense silence fell. Sal's jaw clenched. All right. We need to disrupt their formation. Lieutenant, can you get a preliminary firing solution on the Orithia while we evade? Mira's fingers danced over her console. I'm already projecting trajectories. We can fire a slaved calibration shot at the dreadnought's port rail. Mount to disable its targeting grid. But it'll reduce our range by about 20% though, at 0.25 C. It should still punch through their outer hull. Do it, Sal ordered. Maria, clear point defense. Toggle all missiles to intercept Vector 217. If they get closer than 20,000 kilometers, I want them shredded before they paint us. Aye, Captain. Maria's console chirped as missile silos opened and nano-warheads spun into the void, guided by gravimetric sensors toward the oncoming wave of interceptors. Judicator's second volley Myra initiated Judicator's secondary charge. Outside the Auroras, Edge executed a barrel roll, presenting its flank to the attackers as thrusters emitted short, brilliant bursts of ionized propellant. Each maneuver scraped precious energy, but it complicated the Tsar targeting solution. Below deck, Chief Engineer Isabel Chun monitored power couplings. Her voice crackled over the intercom. Fusion core at peak. Capacitor banks primed. Magnetic field coils at 72%. All subsystems green. Good work, Isabel, Sal replied. Let's show them why we called this ship Aurora's Edge. On the bridge, seconds crawled like hours. The charging readouts edged upward. Power, 60, 70, 80. The rails began to glow with a cool violet incandescence. Power at 95%, Mira announced. Ready on your command. Maria adjusted the missile salvo. Interceptors neutralized. Approaching Dreadnought's secondary screen. Opening salvo in 3, 2, 1. Sal's voice rang out. Fire. Judicator unleashed its second. Shot. The rails flared, and a slender bolt of kinetic fury tore through the void. In the moment it passed the viewport, it was nothing more than a glimmer, but its destination lay miles away. On the Orithia, the projectile struck true. It impacted the Dreadnought's starboard railgun mount, tearing through its reinforced shielding. The secondary array's magnetic containment collapsed, and half the turrets detonated in a hailstorm of shrapnel and plasma. The flagship shuddered, its command deck plunging into chaos. On the Aurora's edge, the bridge erupted in shears tempered by relief. Status? Sal barked, eyes never leaving the display. Enemy flagship crippled, Maria reported. There. Fleet is in disarray. 5th and 6th vessels broke formation. They're retreating to regroup. Lang's tone was cautious. We've taken heavy structural damage hull integrity at 45%. Shields unable to regenerate until we repair. We should withdraw to safe distance and initiate hull repairs. Sal nodded. Agreed. All hands disengage combat. Protocols. Emergency warp vector to 28 by 30. Get us out of here before they reload. The aftermath is the Aurora's edge punched through warp space. Tending lights blinked along the corridors in med wards. Wounded crew were tended by cybernetic medbots. Repair teams hustled through gutted compartments, welding new hull panels in red-hot arcs. In the aft observation deck, Mira and Maria stared out at the streaking stars. That was exhilarating, Maria said, voice soft. I never thought I'd see the day when a kinetic railgun could decide a battle in seconds. Myra's expression was sober. It's more than exhilarating. It's a responsibility. We've shown the galaxy that humanity can wield massive firepower. Now we have to decide how to use it. Maria glanced at her. Do you ever worry about what this means? That one shot could change everything, shift alliances, start wars. Mira turned away from the view. Every day. But we're the ones on the edge. We hold the trigger. If we act with restraint and only use Judicator to protect and deter, we might usher in a new era of stability. But if we fire recklessly, well, look at what we nearly faced today. Maria reached out, placing a hand on Myra's arm. You did good, Lieutenant. You saved this ship and maybe 1,000 lives. Mira gave a small, tight smile. Let's hope it's 1,000 more tomorrow. Back on the bridge, the Grim task of repairs and recalibration began. Captain Sal convened his officers around a holotable, displaying the battered Aurora's edge, its surface crisscrossed with damage markers. We buy ourselves time, but not forever, he said. The Tsar will adapt. They'll develop countermeasures. Our victory is only the opening gambit in a larger conflict. We must prepare for what comes next. Mira tapped a datapad. I recommend we complete orbital repairs at the nearby asteroid base, then deliver our report to High Command. We need to coordinate with the Aleri Republic, for joint exercises demonstrate that this isn't just a Terran weapon, but a tool for galactic order. Sal studied the display. Agreed. Plot a course for Helios Theta Station. And Lieutenant Good. Work. You've changed the balance of power today. Myra nodded, eyes distant. Let's just hope it stays balanced. As the Aurora's edge limped away from Epsilon Prime's gravity well, the afterglow of Judicator's shot lingered in scanners and sensors, an indelible mark across space and time. The blast that shook the void had awoken a sleeping giant. Humanity's unyielding will, forged into steel and magnetic fury. And far beyond the edge's retreating silhouette, alien eyes watched and wondered what terrors and promises lay in humanity's rail-powered future. Under the glass dome of the Lunasenate chamber, delegates from 72 star systems gathered in fractal arrays of holographic projection. Each voice echoed across the vaulted ceiling, emphasizing the fragility of this newfound moment. President Kira Morales, her copper hair wound into a tight coil, stood at the central dais. Behind her, the Terran Federation crest pulsed softly in blue-white light. Before her, avatars of human and alien delegates, Zar, Aleri, Vasari. Even 2 observers from the neutral Dantari League hovered in uneasy silence. Fellow delegates. Morales began, her tone measured but firm. Yesterday, our flagship Aurora's Edge demonstrated the power of Judicator beyond any question. Inevitably, that power has shifted the balance. We cannot deny it. But I stand before you to insist. We do not seek dominion. We seek deterrence, stability, and if you will permit the hope coexistence. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Tsar ambassador, an imposing figure of mottled biocarapace named Salakvar, inclined his head. President Morales, your words are noble, yet the application of such force so close to our colonies. His voice trailed, the translator struggling with the subtle Tsar inflections. ... suggests more than deterrence. Morales met his gaze. The Orythia's retreat was not conquest, it was necessity. We defended ourselves when they attacked. We will not fire Judicator without provocation. She paused as data projections flickered images of the Aurora's Edge's railgun in action, high-speed footage of the first impact, seismic graphs, and yield calculations. Those shots were to save lives, not to claim territory. Aleri Trade Commissioner Genta Voss stepped forward, her crystalline eyes reflecting lunar lights. The Republic is prepared to lend orbital facilities for joint repairs and patrols. But our confidence is tempered. Treaties must be written in more than words. We propose a joint command task force, staffed equally by Terran and Coalition officers, to oversee patrols in the Helios corridor. From the back, voices rose in protest. "Traitor!" A human hardliner shouted, his hologram glitching. "You'd hand over our sovereignty to the Tsar?" A chorus of angry rebuttals followed. Morales raised a gauntlet-mounted gavel, and the chamber fell silent. Debate is welcome, betrayal is not. This proposal is the only path short of endless war. We must choose between peace enforced by mutual trust or dominance enforced by Judicator alone. I stand ready to answer all questions. Over the next cycle, hours stretched into starlight. Technical committees hashed out command protocols. How to integrate Tsar telepaths into Terran chain of command. How to handle Aleri logistics. What rules of engagement would govern the railgun itself. Every point sparked fierce negotiation. Hardliners on both sides accused their leaders of naivete. Moderates reminded them that the alternative was galaxy-wide conflagration. Echoes on Epsilon Prime, meanwhile, on the scarred plains of Epsilon. Prime's Mordecai Basin, Lieutenant Mira al-Karim readied her shuttle for the return journey. The crater's glassy slopes glimmered of the planet's twin suns, silent testament to humanity's debut in kinetic superweapons. Survey teams labored to catalog the altered geology, newly formed mineral phases, shock-synthesized compounds, and strange isotopic ratios that hinted at fusion. Byproducts. Mira gazed down at the jagged spires rising from the impact zone. "They'll call this a war memorial," she muttered. "Or a warning sign. Hard to tell which." A presence at her shoulder made her turn. Captain Krell Vash of the Tsar emissary vessel stood with his carapace shimmering in shifting violet. Light, he wore the neutral zone insignia, a broken lance crossed with a Terran saber. "Lieutenant al-Karim," he greeted, his mandibles clicking softly. "The Republic's envoy is impressed with your data. They believe your analysis could reveal new resources and risks." Mira gave a half-smile. "So even in diplomacy, we hunt for profit." Krell's antennae quivered. "Profit sustains fleets. But peace sustains civilizations. My people fear that Judicator's shot will give Terrans the impetus to extend beyond all borders." She folded her arms. "And I fear that without it, we'll be crushed against the frontier. I can live with neighbors eyeing us warily, but not with extinction." Krell stepped closer, scanning her face. "Neither can we. That is why I offered to destroy the Marauder's threat. But I see your hesitation, fear that once we join, you lose." "Then help me keep it balanced," she challenged. "Stand with me in the Senate. Show the others that the Tsar dare to trust." Krell hesitated, then extended a chitinous hand. "Together, then, toward stability." Their shuttle rose, carrying them toward the battered Aurora's Edge in orbit, and toward the larger orbit of interstellar politics below, the Senate's darkest hour back on Luna. Debate reached its climax as night fell over Mare Imbrium. President Morales reviewed the live feed in her private office, lit by soft bioluminescent glyphs. The Senate's clock ticked inexorably toward the final vote on the Helios Accord, the treaty enshrining joint command and rules of engagement. For railgun deployments, a communication indicator blinked. Morales tapped it, and her chief of staff, Admiral Lin Tran, appeared as a hologram. Her uniform bore the new Joint Command insignia, a stylized pair of railgun rails forming. A star. "Madam President," Tran intoned quietly. "Security reports an attempted breach on Tsar Ambassador Salagvar's quarters. Suspicious energy signature, possibly an explosive device." Morales's jaw tightened. A terrorist cell? Who stands to gain from this peace unraveling? Hardliners within the Federation. We've traced encrypted chatter to a known sympathizer, Senator Conrad Fisk. Tran's projection flickered with distress. He's been vocally opposed to the accord. We believe he intended to kill the ambassador and frame Terran radicals. Morales closed her eyes for a moment. Mobilize security forces. Quarantine. The Senate chamber. I want Fisk detained, but only after the vote passes. If word gets out prematurely, the Senate will collapse into chaos. Tran inclined her head. Understood. Morales took a steadying breath and turned back to the chamber feed. Her reflection fractured across the translucent walls as she watched. Delegates, unaware of the danger they had just escaped, prepared to cast their votes. The Helios Accord was no longer an abstract ideal. It was their only bulwark against savage escalations. Vote of destiny. In the chamber, projection counters lit. Up, for, and against. Silence reigned as the final tally began. One by one, systems announced their choices. A Larry Republic. For Tsar Coalition, minus Salakvar, detained briefly but intact. For Vasari Trades. For, reluctantly, Federation Outer. Colonies. For Federation Hardline Bloc. Against Independent. Miners' League. For Dentari Observers. Abstain when the dust settled. The holographic scoreboard glowed green. Helios Accord ratified. 72 in favor, 13 against, 5 abstentions. A roar of relief and jubilation swept the chamber. Holograms blended as delegates cheered, embraced, and conferred. Morales allowed herself a small, weary smile. History had tilted away from chaos, if only for a moment. In the corridors outside, Senator Fisk was escorted away in iridescent restraints. His glare at the Senate's main doors burned with unspoken threats. But inside, hope reigned. Forging the coalition fleet with the Helios Accord in force, preparations began at once. The newly formed Joint Coalition fleet would be co-flagged, under Terran and Coalition insignia. At Luna docks, retrofitted destroyers emerged alongside Tsar carriers. Under Captain Saul's oversight, Aurora's Edge would serve as the demonstration vessel hosting mixed crews, conducting live exercises, and showcasing the disciplined restraint of Judicator's firepower. Mira joined Krell on the observation deck of the Unity Station, a cylindrical habitat ringed by construction yards where new ships rose from slipways. They watched as engineers attached the final rail segments to the first Tsar Terran cruiser, Harmonia. You know, Krell said quietly, in our culture, we believe a single true bond can erase centuries of enmity. Perhaps this coalition is our bond. Myra's gaze tracked the station's rotating arms. Or perhaps it's a necessary alliance born of mutual fear. Time will tell if it endures on goodwill or on the threat of Judicator's rails. Krell extended one limb to touch hers, and let's ensure goodwill wins, she nodded. For now, we write a new chapter. But tomorrow, the real work begins. Below them, welding torches sparked like distant stars. On Luna, the Senate reconvened to authorize funding. Across Epsilon Prime, settlers prepared to return under the protection of combined patrols. And in the void between worlds, the Railguns. Promise shimmered a sword, held at the throat of war, guiding two species toward a precarious peace. In that fragile alliance, each side carried memories of devastation and hope for renewal. The balance of power had shifted once. Now it lay in the hands of diplomats and captains, of soldiers and scholars. Would they wield it wisely, or let it shatter the galaxy anew? Only time would tell. But as the twin suns of Luna dipped below the horizon line of the station ring, one truth pulsed brighter than any weapon's flare. Peace built on trust could outshine even the mightiest rail-propelled shot. The crimson storm of Argus Station's Pyre Lakes glowed below as the Aurora's edge glided into position, its hull scarred but resolute. Through the forward viewport, the sprawling mining platforms of Argus hung like broken teeth around the core, and beyond them, the Nightshade Ensemble flagship of the Crimson Marauders drifted in silent menace. Lieutenant Myra Al-Karim stood at the railgun targeting console, recalibrating sensors that still remembered Epsilon Prime's blast. Across the bridge, Captain Joran Sal watched the pirate behemoth loom, every muscle in his frame taut. With purpose. Estimated target range, 32,000 kilometers, Mira reported. Nightshade's energy signature is stable. Their jamming fields are at 75% capacity, enough to disrupt comms, but not our encrypted quantum channels. Sal nodded. Good, Maria, lock all defensive grids on me. I don't want any stray shots. We're here to demonstrate precision, not carnage. Chief Weapons Officer Maria Sorensen's fingers flew over her console. Point defense lasers and missile silos prepped. I've set secondary targets on the boarding pods. If any launch, we'll flick them away like sparks. Below decks, Shuttle Pilot Ensign Talus Varine monitored the small fleet of Coalition vessels draped behind the Aurora's edge. 4 Tsar corvettes and 2 Aleri cutters fanned out in a protective arc. The combined force was modest, a fraction of the pirate fleet that once ravaged these lanes, but enough. If Judicator spoke the final word, on the bridge the tension was a living thing. The Nightshade's dreadnought-sized guns, a mix of stolen pulse cannons and jury-rigged missile platforms, swung slowly in a lazy arc that betrayed its confidence. Admiral Voss, pirate lord and terror of the Helios corridor, occupied the flagship's command dais, his scarred visage flickering on the Aurora's edge's holoscreen as he taunted. Strut your secret weapon, Terran. Scare us with your toys. We've drunk harder kicks than that. Sal ignored the broadcast. Instead, he keyed his gauntlet. Myra, give me a final tally. Yield projection, impact coordinates, collateral radius. The tracking display bloomed with overlays. The Nightshade's reactor dome, its main hull plating seams, the intricate lattice of its drive coils. Mira's voice was calm. If we strike at the reactor's magnetron array, a single shot should induce a critical containment breach. Projected yield of secondary plasma detonation, 2 to 3 megatons, contained enough to disable Nightshade without obliterating the entire station complex. Collateral blast radius under shielding, less than 5 kilometers. Saul drew a breath. That's our window. Ensign Varine, verify safety corridors for fleeing civilians and Coalition craft. Aye, Captain, came the reply. Automated distress beacons are active. Evacuation routes clear. Saul turned to the crew. All stations, prepare to fire. On my mark, hold until I say engage. We cannot misfire. We cannot hesitate. The fate of the Helios corridor lies on this shot. The calm before the shot, in the moments that followed, the bridge fell silent, save for the hum of power feedback. Sensor readouts flickered emerald and gold, mapping every nuance of the pirate dreadnought. Myra's fingers hovered over the firing matrix, while Maria's console flared with readiness checks. Outside, the void seemed to hold its breath. Captain Sal glanced at each of them in turn. Lieutenant, weapons check. Judicator fully charged. Rails at 1.1 MV. Magnetic field at 98%. projectile mass locked at 1,200 kilograms. Myra's voice was virtually emotionless. All her awe had been spent on that first shot. Maria. Confirmed. Point defense on standby. Missiles off axis. Boarding pod suppressed. Varine's voice crackled through the comms. Coalition craft are clear. Nightshade's crew making no move to flee. Sol exhaled as if letting go of a lifetime of tension. He keyed the firing sequence. Engage. One shot to bind them. The rails emerged from darkness into brilliance. Electric arcs dancing like brittle silver lightning. The Aurora's edge groaned under the magnetic compression and released the projectile faster than a bullet, more silent. Then a whisper, yet carrying the weight of destiny. Across the vacuum, the bolt seared into the Nightshade's reactor shield, cutting through layers of exotic alloys. On board the pirate flagship, alarm screamed as the magnetron array ruptured. Within microseconds, the core's containment coils melted and twisted, releasing a compact sphere of plasma that boiled outward, tearing holes through decks and corridors. The hull buckled, fractures raced like branching rivers of molten metal. And at the moment of catastrophic failure, the whole ship shuddered in a deafening crescendo. On the Aurora's edge, the crew stared at the holoscreen as the Nightshade's silhouette exploded in a bloom of superheated debris. A blinding flare lit the void, then faded into drifting shards of wreckage. Impact confirmed, Myra whispered. Reactor breach full microwave cascade. Nightshade is no more. Maria nodded, voice hushed. The escorts are signaling surrender. Over the comm network, Admiral Voss's enraged howl crackled, and then abruptly ended as his link was cut. Automated pirate transmissions switched to a green-coded ceasefire. One by one, the remaining Marauder vessels powered down weapons and opened. Hales, open a secure channel, Sol ordered. We'll speak to their captain. Terms written in plasma a moment later, a hologram materialized before the captain's console. A slender figure dressed in the ragged finery of a pirate lord, one mechanical arm replaced by servos and weapons mounts. Captain Mir Vosseri's eyes burned with fierce pride, but her shoulders slumped. You Terrans and your allies have shown brutality and mercy in the same breath, she said, voice rough but clear. We surrender under your terms. Sol inclined his head. No further. Attacks on civilian or mining targets. You and your crew will stand trial before the Joint Coalition Fleet's tribunal. Those found guilty of piracy or massacre will face justice. The rest may integrate into civilian workforces or join the Coalition's defense force if they choose. Mir. Vosseri's mechanical arm clicked. I accept your terms. We choose to live beyond the barrel of a gun. Sol activated the comlink. Myra, dispatch security teams to secure the derelict Nightshade and transfer prisoners to Unity Station. On it, Myra replied, already issuing commands. As the hologram faded, Maria exhaled. We really did it, Captain. One shot, and we broke the back of the Marauders. Sol allowed himself a brief smile. One shot, Lieutenant. But ours is a coalition victory of trust as much as firepower. Dawn of a new era in the days that followed. The Helios corridor thrummed with reconstruction. Argus Station's mining platforms resumed operations under coalition oversight. Settlers returned to the cratered surface of nearby moons, and trade convoys wove once hazardous routes, now guarded by Tsar, Aleri, and Terran escorts. At Unity Station, a gala assembly hailed the signing of the Corridor Compact, anchoring peace with joint patrol protocols, resource-sharing agreements, and mutual defense clauses. Mira stood beside Krell Vash on the Unity Station's observation deck, overlooking the docking ring alive with multicolored ships. Krell's carapace shimmered warmly in the station's lighting. You humans have a no. Expression. One shot is all it takes. I see its truth. Myra nodded. We also say, With great power comes great responsibility. We'll police this corridor together and use Judicator only when every other option fails. Krell's antennae twitched in affirmation. Then let this alliance be stronger than any railgun slug. On the floor below, President Morales, Ambassador Salakvar, and Commissioner Voss signed the final accord, their pens forging lines that would bind their peoples. Captain Sal and Admiral Tran looked on, pride shining in their eyes. And in the quiet hum of the Unity Station, the Judicator rails mounted on the Aurora's Edge's sister ship, now under joint command, glowed softly, a perpetual reminder of what a single, well-measured shot could accomplish. Mira placed a hand on the glass, watching the pinpricks of light in the void. We rewrote the rules of engagement, she said softly. Krell stood beside her. And with that rewrite, we choose peace. As they turned away, the twin suns of Helios rose over the station's horizon, illuminating a future defined not by war, but by the balance forged in that decisive moment one shot had reshaped worlds, and one accord that bound them together.